Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Rachel Martin. I'm an English language specialist, and I want to welcome all of you to the RELO Andes monthly webinar series. So I'm so glad you're here, and especially if you are a first-time viewer, I know we have maybe some new people joining us today. I welcome you. If you're watching us on the U.S. Embassy in Peru's Facebook page. We don't usually broadcast there, but we have kind of a special event this month. So as I said, this is the RELO Andes webinar series. And if you're wondering what that means, RELO is the Regional English Language Office. And RELO Andes covers English teachers supporting English teachers and English language learners in Argentina, in Bolivia, in Chile, in Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, of course, Peru, and around the world. So I see so many people commenting already. I want to say hi, a shout out to Jimmy and Callao, to Elvin Ayacucho. We have so many people. Just keep telling us in the comment. We love to see where you are at. So as I said, this is the RELO Andes webinar. If you don't follow it already, follow RELO Andes on Facebook so you can see when we come back again next month. But for today, let me just introduce myself. As I said, I am Rachel Martin. I'm an English teacher and an English teacher trainer. I'm originally from the city of Seattle. If you've ever watched like Grey's Anatomy, it's set in my hometown. And this month, today, I am joined by a special guest. So I will let Jeremias introduce himself.
How's everything going? Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I am so glad to be here with you today and all of our wonderful guests. So my name is Jeremias Ceremonis, and I'm an English language fellow in West Africa. I've had the great fortune of teaching in New York City in the public school system, in Quito in Ecuador, Argentina, and in Senegal and Guinea-Bissau, where I taught methodology and have been working with a women's empowerment group. I've had some great fortune of meeting wonderful people in all of these countries, and I am very lucky to be sharing this moment here with you today. So thank you, Rachel.
Oh, I'm so glad you could join me. It looks like we have people joining us from Venezuela, from Chorrillos, from Lima. What else are we seeing here? From Nazca, from Tayacaja. Okay, yeah, thank you so much for being here, everyone. So Jeremias and I met when we were both in West Africa for a while, and you immediately came to mind when we kind of decided on this topic for this month. What are we going to be talking about today?
That is a great question, Rachel. And yes, I am so glad that we were able to meet because that brings us here today. So today we are talking about teaching or talking about difficult topics in the classroom and maybe really focusing on things that that we can talk about in the classroom and how these topics come up.
Great. So, you know, this broadcast, these webinars are intended for English teachers, but if you've ever taken an English class or maybe you teach another subject, you are welcome here too. We'd love to hear from you, hear about your experiences. And why don't we start that out by asking a question? So anytime you see this slide, I really want to hear your answers. The way we're connected, we can see your comments coming down the screen. So I want to start out by getting your opinion. What do you think? Do difficult topics belong in an English classroom? So if you're watching us on Facebook Live, head over to the comments. If you're watching us live on YouTube, we can see those as well. So, I mean, I invited you here because I want to hear your perspective too. What do you think, Jeremias? How would you answer that question?
I think I'd love to hear a little bit from our viewers and everybody who's joining us today. And I know that we've all had some difficult moments in the classroom. The main thing is to breathe deep and relax. And maybe together, when we discuss these topics, it can help us figure out how to work with our students and how to create a more student-centered classroom. Even with difficult topics, we can learn a lot from our students. So let's see what you guys have to say over there.
Well, I'm seeing a comment here from Manuel who says, depending on the level. So, it depends on the level of students. And I mean, when I'm thinking about that, level could mean both age and what they can say in English. Great. Does anyone else want to share their thoughts? Maybe if you are an English teacher, has that happened to you? You're teaching a lesson or you're leading a discussion and suddenly it turns serious or it gets a little bit awkward. We have some more opinions coming in here depending on the topic, trying to avoid religious or political ones. That can be such a challenge, when it's really on people's minds. Okay.
Definitely. Religion and other aspects like culture, these are a lot of important factors to keep in mind. So definitely a wonderful thing.
Okay. Oh, I love that Manuel just clarified he was thinking about proficiency, but yes, we can talk about age or proficiency there. Great. Keep writing your thoughts in the comments. We can see them. We want this to be a two-way conversation if you are watching us live. And if you're watching us later, just, think about your answer in your head. I just saw one more over there I want to highlight. Gabby said, yes, but you have to be careful. And, that's close to what my answer would be. If I were the one answering this, I would say yes, but it needs to happen in an environment, of respect. Did you have another one you wanted to highlight there, Jeremiah?
I definitely did. Sorry to interrupt, but Julissa brings up a very good point, which is maybe referring to proficiency and discussing phrasal verbs. So we need to know that our students do want to express themselves, but because of the language, it may be difficult at times.
That's a great point, to keep in mind. I think sometimes students become a little bit frustrated with that, or as teachers, you can forget how much depth and how much knowledge students bring to class when they have a hard time speaking about them.
Absolutely.
There was a great comment there about teaching elementary. I know both you and I, we've both taught primary before. Sometimes you can have some pretty deep conversations with kids, but however it's happening, it really does need to happen in an environment of respect. And there needs to be ground rules, which if you're not familiar with that term, ground rules means we have just kind of a base of agreements, how we're going to operate, how this discussion is going to take place. For me, the most important thing is to protect student safety. And, we'll talk more about that as we go on. We're going to be here for about the next half hour and keep this conversation going. Oh, I would love to highlight what Camilo just said there about politics and religion. There's one perspective we can definitely take. They can be uncomfortable to discuss. But if we're talking about history, you can't really talk about history and ignore some of those things. We don't want to ignore things in history just because they're uncomfortable. So that feeds right into why should we have these conversations? We should have them to build critical thinking skills, but also because as a teacher, we are teaching values. We are teaching civic engagement. And I know you're going to talk a lot more about that as we keep going here, Jeremiah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll be covering all of those points and definitely going over values and respect.
And let's just, yep, exactly what Alejandra was saying here about teaching children. So, you try to stay in funny topics, but empathy, respect, those values, you're really building them, you're forming them in children as in what you choose to discuss in the classroom and what you choose to avoid. That's great. Thank you for that observation.
Yeah, definitely a great point from Alejandra. And we know that children can surprise us. Sometimes they touch on some very interesting or difficult topics, and we may not always know how to approach them. So that's why we stay communicated with each other as teachers.
Exactly. And Oh, I love what Louise just said here about culture is the link to language. I do want to just highlight these words because so far we've been saying difficult topics. And I know that was something we kind of agreed on before we started this webinar.
Yep.
I just want to say that, some topics and viewpoints are not up for debate. So in my classroom, I'm not going to do what's called playing devil's advocate because I don't want to perpetuate and I'll never accept a viewpoint that dehumanizes my students or dehumanizes people or calls for violence. So we're choosing the word difficult because we're talking about things that could be uncomfortable. We're talking about things that maybe people have legitimate differences of opinion. They think differently, but we're not saying open it up to every perspective because some of them are really harmful. But I think you had a question for our audience here. So again, we're watching the comments.
Absolutely, Rachel. And please remember, if you're watching this live, use the chat box and tell us your responses. So we'd love to hear from you. So a big question is, what are some difficult topics in your classroom setting? How does your classroom look like? And what are some difficult topics that you've come across?
Great. And while people are typing their answers in there, I just saw someone say hello to us from Argentina, which is where you're located as well. That's great.
I'm in Mar del Plata in Argentina.
Okay, yeah. Well, it looks like you've got Miriama joining us from there as well. We have Jennifer from Ayacucho in Peru, Mateo from Cusco in Peru.
Wonderful, yes. Let's say hi to everybody joining us from so many different places. And something to mention in our discussion is that sometimes what makes a topic difficult isn't the belief, but the practice. Perhaps everyone agrees that racism is bad, but how much people believe it exists depends on their own experiences. So not all conflicts are about the ideals, but about their implementation. Our opinions are based on our own experiences. And teaching is, it's important to make sure that we keep in mind that it's a reflective practice and that we are learning right alongside our students.
Okay, so I have a couple comments here we can highlight from Manuel talking about his has taught mostly teenagers. So they're discovering a whole new culture and perspective. They're learning, how to look at things differently. We have Salazar has said that the outbreak, the pandemic, is a difficult and controversial topic, especially with teenagers. I mean, there's a lot of strong emotions around that. It's a very difficult time. I agree there. What else do we have? Oh, shout out to Cynthia in Costa Rica and Monica in Colombia. What else do we have here?
A wonderful comment over here from Yolanda Ramos from Bolivia. Hello, how's it going over there, Yolanda? I think our students should feel free to express themselves, express what they think and how they feel about it. But as you said, it is important to set ground rules, a friendly and respectful environment. That is just a beautiful way to express what you're feeling, Yolanda, about how the classroom works. And something we'll be talking about a little bit later is that maybe we can use our students as the very teachers in the classroom to set their own ground rules.
Great. Yes, and I'm seeing other people giving us some lists of topics here: politics, wars, sexual identity, crime. Someone mentioned abortion. These are all topics that, our students are thinking about and talking about in real life. So I could see how those could come up. Oh, we have Hilda said death of people close to them. It's, of course, unfortunately very relevant this year, as we know all the difficulties and trauma that our students are encountering. When that comes up in class, that can be very difficult as well. Yeah, so I think we've kind of talked about this here. Several people are talking about COVID being a difficult topic right now for their students. Students just get stressed. Farida says here. Yeah. So really, depending on who your students are, some topics could be acceptable and very relevant, and some topics you might not be wanting to have in the classroom. For me, one of the guiding most important things is student safety. So I want to lead a brave conversation. I want my students to feel that they can talk about what's on their mind, but I do also want to be aware of the context in terms of bullying, or how is their family going to react if something they say becomes public, and that really goes to cultural norms. There might also be school policy, depending on what type of English class it is. Sometimes we end up with a lot more discussion than others. The age of the students, and teachers' preparedness to facilitate, which is really what we're here to talk about today. How we as teachers can maybe be more ready to have these conversations. And Marcia just made a great point about students being at home. And we're going to circle back to that at the end of our presentations, but I'm so glad that's on your mind there, because when we talk about limits and student safety and what is a good topic to have in the class, it maybe does change depending on where the class is held or how the class is being held, definitely. So, Jeremiah, I know you've got six main points for us today that hopefully will give the teachers who are watching some more tools to navigate these difficult conversations.
Definitely, Rachel. So it's always good to kind of break these topics up as teachers. It's good to kind of take these things apart and maybe talk about each separate point, and then we can bring this stuff together to see how we can build our classrooms. So some of the main topics are liberation pedagogy, civic humanism, rules for discussion. Like I mentioned before, we'll see how maybe we can focus on having our students create these rules. Modeling civic behavior. We know that modeling in language learning and in any type of learning is huge. The way we physically show our students how to maybe create language or how to have a proper discussion. Keeping the discussion tied to the material, and moderating negative thinking. Always keeping things positive. We know that positivity is huge in the classroom.
All right, let's jump in.
So starting with liberation pedagogy, maybe to kind of break this down a little bit, we can keep in mind that the teacher should seek to develop a critical consciousness among students. She should allow the students to bring their own experiences and perspectives to the classroom. We can talk about some issues that we've investigated in the class, and some things and issues that are investigated by students outside of the classroom as well. With the aim of having students come to a new understanding of their place in the world, right? Thinking about metacognition depending on the age of the student, and even some older students, some adults, we can work to, we don't want to change anybody's mind, but we can work to teach others how to understand each other a little bit better. And then maybe we can put all of this together, and some problems that may come up that may be social related or political problems, we can learn to kind of talk about these topics in the classroom.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, let me just ask a clarifying question. Your basic idea here is that the world doesn't stop at the classroom door. You aren't creating a bubble that's completely cut off from the rest of your students' experience.
Exactly, Rachel. Thank you so much for bringing that up and for phrasing it like that, because our classroom is a continuation of the outside world, and we are looking to not only create a safe environment in the classroom and a respectful environment in the classroom, but to have our students learn how to have respectful conversations with anybody they come across. We're learning a lot of things. We're not just learning English in our classrooms, right?
So thank you for that. Civic humanism. What do you mean by this?
That is a great question, Rachel. Thank you. So maybe civic humanism, we can think of another way of saying civic humanism. It would be maybe become a better citizen, or citizenship, or our place in our community, our place in society, right? So teaching should prepare students for responsibilities of active citizenship. Teaching should be concerned in part with developing moral virtues such as religious and cultural tolerance and understanding, and a sense of social responsibility.
So it looks like Jimmy has a question for us here about project-based content learning where students are figuring stuff out in class. How would that tie in with these concepts?
That's a great question, Jimmy. So maybe if you're focusing on content-based learning, which is it's really big in teaching now, not just focusing on language, right? So some of the very content that we want to use, we can ask our students what they are interested in learning. And if we happen to select the content that we're teaching in class, we can create a more authentic environment by asking students to bring in outside information and focusing on things like Instagram or Facebook that may seem a little iffy at times, but they are what our students connect to every day. So they can gather information from these places and from the news, and that way we can bring the content that we select or that our students select into the classroom with more authentic material with our everyday lives.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely believe that English teachers need to be paying attention to social media. It can be such a powerful part of language learning. And like you said, it's where a lot of authentic engagement is already happening. We probably shouldn't be ignoring that.
Definitely, Rachel. We don't want to make these our enemies, right? Because they capture all of our attention.
But we don't want it to be a free-for-all.
No, there's a happy medium, right? And these are things that we can discuss in the classroom. We can acknowledge that our students connect to social media, and then even have moments where we connect to social media together, or even have these discussions, but with limits, right? And these limits, by discussing this with our students, by acknowledging that social media exists, our students can even tell us, oh, maybe I spend too much time with social media, or maybe I see bullying on the internet, and this is something that I don't want to be a part of. And these are discussions that may come up. So in the classroom, going back to what we mentioned before, it's awesome if we can have our students create their own rules, right? We are looking to be facilitators. This is a term that's been becoming more and more used instead of professor, instead of teacher. Facilitator is someone who kind of guides someone else in the way to do something. And we can be facilitators in the classroom by having our students create their own rules. Students will know how to establish clear ground rules in the classroom. We are focusing on student-centered learning, and by having students create their own rules, they will be the owners of their own education and the way that they want things to go. You can provide some ground rules of your own once you have students set their own rules as well. So maybe some things to focus on are that you and your students can only, maybe some rules that we can talk about are that you and your students can make statements about an issue or a person or a group if you're prepared to make the statement directly and respectfully to a person with whom the issue is important. And we're keeping in mind that we're never attacking someone else as a person. We are just discussing someone else's point of view. Encourage students to argue from a point of authority, and to link their claims to assertions or appropriate evidence, but never to attack someone else's person, right? And maybe one final thing to keep in mind when creating rules is to cultivate tentativeness among students, encourage them to explore their fixed ideas and prejudices, and have them recognize that confusion and uncertainty are stages of development. And that's how we develop our own opinions.
Wow, you said so many things in there. I just want to highlight, you were talking about not attacking people, talking about the ideas. I think I've seen that as a ground rule, maybe in your classes. I know in several classes I've observed that, we discuss ideas, not the people who hold them, and really put the focus there. You also mentioned tentativeness, which, tentativeness is the opposite kind of certainty. And I think people like to come into a discussion. It's our natural tendency, especially if it's difficult, controversial, emotional. People want to come in really certain of their idea. So you're saying that you want students to be comfortable not being so certain? How does that work?
Absolutely. So our brains can constantly change. We think we have these solid ideas. We think that our way of thinking is concrete. This very moment is never is our ideas, our current ideas are so concrete, right? From all of our experiences and everything that we've lived through. But the truth is that we are very malleable. Our brains can change and we can learn to change. And one thing that we are establishing in the classroom is positivity and being open. And it's important to keep in mind that we will facilitate this positivity. We will facilitate our students becoming more open individuals. I see one comment over here from Gabriela Rodriguez. Are we teachers also kind of therapists? That's funny and kind of an interesting comment. And we can really keep in mind the fact that maybe sometimes we are therapists. We need to have an emotional understanding of our students, or we're teaching this emotional awareness in our classrooms. And we're also teaching our students to recognize emotions in other students, right?
Yeah, I think if I can just kind of give my answer to that as well, I start out by my initial reaction is no, we're not therapists. Like, I think it's really important to know where that boundary is, to have healthy boundaries with your students, to maybe have connections with professionals that you can refer a student who is in crisis to. But what you're saying is so true. We can draw on the knowledge from other fields. I think I spend a lot of time reading business leadership. I spend a lot of time reading stuff that's maybe more related to psychology. We can inform our teaching from a lot of things like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Keeping in mind that everything is connected, and then that it's important for us to try to have that knowledge of knowing where to refer our students if we see a situation where we can help them through the another source, right?
Yeah. So moving on to your fourth point here. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this up, Rachel. And we know that modeling is just a beautiful way to teach in our classrooms, right? Showing our students what we expect from them is maybe sometimes more important and more efficient than us asking or giving them a set of rules to follow or an assignment to follow. If we show our students what we want them to do, then they will most likely understand it. They will they will hear us act a certain way, and they will see us visually acting a certain way through our mannerisms. Modeling civil behavior through your actions, students will watch you see how you handle yourself. If you speak with respect and care in the context of heated discussions, then your students will also be more likely to do so.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a classic pedagogy book. What's it called? The Students Are Watching. I mean, students are always going to believe what you do and how you behave more than what you say. You want to make sure you aren't contradicting yourself.
Absolutely, that's a great book to bring up, and definitely we're always watching each other to see how we interact, and we learn things indirectly even when we're not aware.
So that comment that we just highlighted a moment ago, I'm sorry, I missed the name on it. She was saying how important it is to kind of have established your topic and established the respect, which I think the respect goes to the ground rules. Oh, thank you so much. We've got it back here. We've discussed respect in terms of ground rules, but staying on topic, is that really important?
I think that is absolutely important, because our students can also, once we get the discussion going and it's a nice, healthy back and forth, at times with a lot of passion, and when things are flowing, even unexpectedly, when things are going extremely well, our students can kind of move away from the topic they may think that they are using outside information to connect to the discussion being had, but sometimes it can veer off and go in another direction. So it's important for us as facilitators to keep the discussion where it's supposed to be, kind of, and not bring out outside information that may not be so related to the content.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel. And one really important factor is to maybe to reword this. Instead of moderate negative thinking, we should try to optimize positive thinking. Sometimes students may think, oh no, if you're being positive all the time, you're not really being yourself, or it's being fake. And no, if you're moderating negative thinking and strong emotions in your students and in yourself, you can kind of model for your students how to reframe strong feelings into productive dialogue. And this is all connected to positivity. We should teach our students how to disagree with someone else's ideas without attacking someone's person, right? Without attacking somebody personally. Positivity and optimism are key for any difficult topic.
And you're really finding, that middle space. You're threading the needle, as we say. You don't want to be so positive and optimistic that you're being really fake. Students don't connect with that. So do you have any advice for finding kind of authentic optimism?
Absolutely. There's always a lot of our thinking is kind of led by the way that we speak. We can tell how someone's thinking by the way that they are speaking. And maybe when I talk about positivity, maybe another way to say positivity in the classroom for me is to keep in mind the word respect, right? And the fact that we are not looking to make anybody feel bad in the classroom. Difficult topics may come up, but we need to respect each other. And that, to me, respect is very connected to positivity.
Great.
To making sure we have a positive outcome from a discussion.
We also had a question here. I think it was Gigi who said, was asking, why aren't we talking about a debate right now? And we just kind of chose to focus more on discussions today. Debates can definitely be really productive. I know a lot of teachers like them, but they're pretty formal. They take a lot of preparation. I think they take, to an extent, a certain English level, whereas discussions happen all the time in most classes, I've noticed.
Absolutely, Rachel. And let me bring up another comment from Gabriela Rodriguez here. So she says that sometimes I have felt that, especially right now, during this pandemic, classes have been like an escape for our students, an escape for them. So yeah, we need to keep in mind a reality that we are facing some new norms in teaching. A lot of this distance learning, virtual platforms, so many terms that we have, right? But a lot of us are connecting via internet. We're not physically in the classroom. And that things may be going on at home. There may be another environment behind just connecting with your class, right? So it's not just about the class. We need to keep in mind that there are many other elements that come into play.
Yeah, and knowing your students, I mean, as much as we can. I know it's so much harder this year to really know what's going on. I just wanted to highlight this from Marcos here, because I think this is going back to your couple points ago, but it's so important about teachers modeling.
Absolutely. So maybe I'll read Marcos's comment. So teachers are mirrors for students. Whatever you do in class, make sure one will copy the same thing you do. So it's essential to behave properly in front of the students. Definitely, Marcos. That's definitely something that I feel the way that you worded that you feel strongly about. But our actions speak louder than words many times. So it's important to keep in mind that modeling is huge in the classroom.
It's an old saying, but it's an applicable saying. It's still true.
Always comes up.
I almost feel like we don't have to ask this, but we will, because we've had so many people commenting in the chat. I just want to thank everyone who is live with us right now. Thank you for your comments there. I know we can't bring all of them on screen at the same time, but I hope you will come back and join us when we do this again next month. We aren't quite done, but we're wrapping up here. So I want to ask, how do you keep a respectful environment in your own class? If you are a teacher, what are some other techniques, or maybe you use some of the 6 that Jeremiah's already told us about today? What works for you in keeping a respectful environment? I think if I can add one on there that we didn't have in there, an exercise sometimes I like to do is timed talking, where they have to get in the habit, you put students in pairs and they have to get in the habit of not interrupting each other. And that can be so hard to do because they're so poised, they're so ready. But, just getting used to holding on to your opinion, really listening.
I love that, Rachel. I don't think I've ever used that, but I would definitely use it in my conversation club in Guinea-Bissau, because that time talking, I think, has one really important factor in mind, and that's listening, right? We're trying to get our students to be better listeners.
So let's see, let's highlight some of these that we're seeing over here. Looks like Kim is saying to model and teach good listening skills. Looks like we have Karen saying to be respectful, we need to have clear rules, be consistent, listen, and be tolerant. What else do we have here? I like Ada's comment talking about building the community of learning.
Definitely. Keeping in mind different opinions is always a big one, and the fact that we all deserve respect, right?
Farida says using good requests, giving the opportunity to everyone, and that's such a good point. Sometimes you have to just wing it. You get thrown into a discussion, but when you're planning it, when you have time to prepare and really think through your questions can have such an effect.
So Susanna says, in her case, it's important to tell students the rules before you do an activity. Also understanding their ideas and arguments. Yeah, so before you start anything, it's important to go over the rules. That way things don't get out of hand and you don't want to implement the rules during this heated discussion, or, it's kind of hard to go back sometimes. You can do it, but
yeah, Anthony has one here where it seems like they're almost rehearsing in advance. He's talking about doing a role play.
Oh,
so maybe
wonderful.
they're comfortable with it.
Definitely. Role playing is wonderful, and you can even give your students some dialogues to practice, just to read and act out a proper discussion, which you can bring your students to act out the modeling that you want them to show.
So I want to just highlight this here, the difference between a spontaneous, or we might call it an organic conversation, where it just happens. And I know that sometimes those can be very productive. They turn into teachable moments sometimes. And I guess you as a teacher, you have to really make a judgment call in the moment. Like, is this something we're going to pursue? Or am I going to say, we're not going to have this discussion today, let's have it in our next class? Or even just saying, I don't think we're going to discuss that in class. Like, you have to make those split-second decisions. But I do really like being open to discussions that I hadn't planned for, as long as we have that base of respect in class.
Absolutely, Rachel. This is such a big one, and this can catch us off guard. Even some very seasoned and amazing teachers are probably caught off guard sometimes with some commentary, which can lead to a discussion. So we need to see how to moderate this. Maybe try to stay as relaxed as possible, but spontaneous moments come up in the classroom at all times.
So much of teaching, I find, is, being aware of my own emotional response, whether it's surprise, whether it's frustration, whether it's whatever it is, and then kind of moderating that so that I can help the students moderate theirs as well. I need to know what I'm feeling in order to not overreact or underreact.
Oh, I love that. Really understanding how we feel about something that's being said is a great way to kind of process and help our students how to moderate. Wonderful.
And we promised we would touch on this, kind of coming back to the fact that we're all teaching virtually or by distance or by WhatsApp. And that does make it more complicated. Someone earlier mentioned, students have their whole family around them. So what they say, even if you set an agreement in your class and everyone in the class agrees to confidentiality or to not go, talk about what someone said, there might be other ears listening. So it can be a lot harder to develop that trust. Which doesn't mean don't have the conversations. It just means, be very sensitive to what's going on. I think I have to be careful not to think that a successful conversation or a successful discussion only occurs when students just tell their deepest stories, bare their souls, just when it gets really deep. That doesn't have to happen every time for it to be a successful discussion.
Absolutely, Rachel. That's a great point to bring up, and we can keep in mind something like using the chat sometimes, or emailing for certain discussions, or we can kind of continue a difficult discussion. We can use some content-based learning and kind of develop a difficult discussion into writing an essay. And if it's very serious, then we can use other sources and maybe send our students to a place where they may receive some help.
So really keeping in mind that we don't want to shut down difficult discussions, but we also can, as the leaders in the classroom, we can kind of facilitate them or guide them or plan for them in a way to really be helpful to our students.
Absolutely, Rachel. And we need to keep in mind also that difficult discussions or difficult topics that come up in class are sometimes things that students feel passionately about. And teaching English or teaching in general, really, we are looking to connect to our students' passions, right? So we can't just ignore these and put them aside. We need to bring them into the classroom using some of the tools that we discussed today, but there are ways to do so.
Yeah, and you made such a good point there about students may feel very passionately about it. Remembering that when we're talking about a difficult topic, our students may have different experiences with it. And going all the way back to what I said earlier about keeping students safe, that means keeping them emotionally safe as well, socially safe, and understanding that something that I might be able to talk about academically might be my student's lived experience. I should never have a student who is from an oppressed group or someone who has been a victim of a situation. They don't have to share their experience in class, and they shouldn't have to speak on behalf of that group. That's my job as the teacher, oftentimes, to make sure they're not put on the spot there.
Absolutely, Rachel. Yes. So it's really important for us to be respectful and for us to be culturally aware. We ask this from our students, but it's so important for us to have this and to know our students. We get to know our students little by little. So don't rush into any discussions that you may not be sure about. I see one comment from Aime. For me, let's see. Oh, it just, oh, thank you very much. For me, the teacher inspires the students, without a doubt, without a doubt. So your passions, your ideas in the classroom, they will inspire students and you will serve as a wonderful role model. So you can also bring in discussions into the classroom that you feel passionately about and help your students understand how to have these wonderful and respectful discussions.
And as they get so much more comfortable with it, I think it works the other way around too, that, our students end up inspiring us. Our students are pretty amazing. I love when they can bring who they are and what they care about into class. So I want to just kind of wrap us up here. If you're watching us live, I do want to remind you, let you know that this is a monthly event. So we have the RELO Andes monthly webinar. This is for any English teachers who want to tune in. Follow us on Facebook. That's usually the best way to find out about this webinar and other training opportunities that they're putting on. The next webinar is going to be on February 18th. So feel free to mark that on your calendar. And if you're in Peru, if you're watching us in Peru, through the embassy page there, make sure you're liking and following them as well. I know they've been putting out like an English word of the week and some different things. So I would recommend following both of those for some great opportunities and information there. I also want to invite you all of you to a post-webinar discussion group. We've been doing these for a couple of months, so it happens 24 hours after we broadcast this the first time. You do need to sign up. So please check the RELO Andes Facebook page. There'll be a link. Sign up if you want to come chat some more about this tomorrow. It would be great to talk to you. So we are going to open it up to questions now. I know we've been doing questions all the way through. But if you have some more questions you'd like to ask Jeremiah or I, we can just kind of keep this open for a little bit.
I see one question there, if I can bring this one up. So from Gonzalo, so the question is, do you guys feel that difficult discussions are better covered in the beginning or at the end of a class? So if we begin our class and there is a difficult topic that is brought up, we can kind of make a mental note, or we can let our students know that we will be discussing this topic. But first, maybe going over some rules. And like we mentioned before, making sure that our classes are student-centered and we're not authoritarian. And we have our students create the rules for these wonderful discussions. We can ask our students to create these rules and to maintain respect. And then we can go back to the difficult topic and kind of begin a fruitful discussion after.
I really like that, you bring it back to being student-centered and remembering that we might not have that community and that respect and that trust right at the beginning. So I can't expect my students to go super deep on day one. I need to earn that and build that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then focusing on content-based learning, we can also say that we will be talking about this very difficult topic in the future. And keeping that topic as part of the content, since we already know that our students are passionate about it. That's why they bring it up.
So I see, there we go. There's the question I wanted to bring up from a bit earlier. When students are different ages, what do you do if you have a group that has a lot of differences?
Different ages, that's a wonderful question to ask, and that can seem like an obstacle sometimes, and it can be a wonderful tool in the classroom, because different ages means different perspectives. And I think we can go back to the fact that we are looking for our students to be better listeners, to improve listening skills. So even with different ages, the younger students may surprise us. So we need to give everybody a chance to speak and listen in.
So what about error correction? Do you do that in the middle of a discussion?
That is a wonderful question. And there is something called rephrasing and kind of an indirect way of correcting our students. So we don't want to say, oh, look at you, you made a mistake, or this is an error in front of everybody. You can kind of rephrase or reword what our students say, kind of in a casual way. This is a teaching tool, and we can make it seem less obvious that the student is being corrected. The student will say, oh, okay, yeah, in their mind, they'll say, yes, okay, maybe I could say it like this, or reword it.
And doing what you said for the last one too, just keeping a list and talk about the big errors or the big teachable moments at the end, not interrupting the flow.
Definitely, definitely.
Well, I think we are just about ready to sign off here. So I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. Let's give some last minute shout outs here. It looks like we have Musa in Senegal. Good to hear from you. We have Elva. Thank you for being here. Simeona is asking if we can share this material. And I do just want to one more time invite you to subscribe and like. These webinars get archived on the RELO Andes Facebook page and also on a YouTube channel. So if you know another teacher who you think might be interested in this material, you can send them the link. They can come watch later. And hopefully I'll see you back here on February 18th. So thank you so much for being here, Jeremiah. Thank you so much to all of our viewers.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It was wonderful, and thank you for your participation also.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.